people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy.
The undisputed super featherweight champion of the world, Alicia, the Bumgarner.
That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. The continued controversy of this past Olympic Games and how now Olympic gold medalist Algerian boxer Imane Khalif, at the center of the Olympics, filed a legal complaint over online harassment.
Filed a complaint with who to hold who accountable.
The Algerian boxer at the center of a gender row at the Paris Olympics has filed a legal complaint saying she has been a victim of online harassment. Imane Khalif's lawyer, Nabil Boudi, said the complaint was filed with the Paris prosecutor's office on Friday.
To hold who responsible.
Who, the IBA? You're contesting what it is the IBA was saying? Is that who you're going to hold accountable for all of this? Because if you do, if you try to, then what you have to worry about is discovery.
Huh?
That if they were to try to hold the IBA responsible for the online harassment the fighter received as a result of what the IBA said, the IBA would be within their full rights to defend themselves. And then what the Algerian would have to worry about is what comes out in discovery.
The results of those tests.
On Saturday, the gold-winning boxer said, "All that is being said about me on social media is immoral. I want to change the minds of people around the world."
Well, Imane, there's a very easy way you can do that.
If what you're trying to do is refute what the IBA is saying, prove them wrong. Do a cheek swab.
They're not gonna do that.
In the build-up of the Olympic final, the IBA announced they had been contacted by Imane Khalif's legal team and Lin Yuteng's legal team, and that they were to not further discuss the results of the tests they conducted in 2022 and 2023,
And the results that got them banned.
what sounds tantamount to a cease and desist letter, in an effort to suppress any further information from getting out that might stoke the flames of this controversy. So now, at least one of the two controversial boxers has filed a formal complaint in Paris, but who are you holding accountable? Who are you holding responsible for what you claim is online harassment? Khalif was crowned an Olympic champion on Friday after comfortably beating China's Yang Liu by unanimous decision to win gold in the women's welterweight final. She won each of the 3 rounds on the judges' scorecards and jumped into the arms of her trainer when the decision was announced. He carried the 25-year-old around the arena on his shoulders in celebration. "For 8 years, this has been my dream, and I'm now the Olympic champion and gold medalist," Khalif said through an interpreter. Asked about the row, she told reporters, "That also gives my success a special taste because of those attacks. I'm fully qualified to take part in this competition," she added. "I'm a woman, like any other woman. I was born as a woman. I live as a woman, and I am qualified."
It was a hard-fought fight. I gave her my best. It's upsetting that some people are criticizing me because of my natural-born gender. The only thing I have to say to those people is, suck my dick.
Like any of the other vagaries in association with these Olympic Games and the controversy around them, the details of who they're complaining about, who are they lodging a complaint against for targeted harassment online? Who? The IBA?
Because you can't take everybody online to court. You can't sue people for what they think.
Especially when what they think is all based on what the IBA said, in tandem with the masculine appearance of both Imane Khalif and Lin Yuteng.
Affording these two controversial athletes some understanding. There are women out there who at times, they've got musculature and some masculine features, some masculinity, or what can be interpreted as that. But how many of those women have an entire organization saying they tested them and they have male chromosomes? That's the smoking gun. I mean, that's what puts it over the top, what the IBA is saying, and you're not refuting that.
Khalif had been under intense scrutiny after a previous fighter quit after just 46 seconds, saying it was to protect her health as the Algerian's punches were so strong.
That's what people see, that Imaine Khalif is basically overpowering the other girls.
Khalif had said winning gold would be the best response to her critics, but it seems to have only emboldened them further, enraged them.
Winning the gold didn't quell the controversy, it didn't settle it, it only made it worse.
And how Thomas Bach of the IOC claims that there is no scientific method to distinguish the male athletes from the female athletes and who's supposed to compete in what category. If that's the case, then why even have categories at all? Some argued that they should not have been allowed to compete due to concerns they may have elevated testosterone levels that can lead to an extra strength and muscle advantage, potentially endangering their opponents.
People are still arguing that.
Khalif and the Taiwanese boxer were both banned from the World Boxing Championships last year, with the International Boxing Association, the IBA, that has now been stripped of recognition, saying they failed gender eligibility tests. And how the head of the IOC has responded to all of this by claiming that there is no scientific proof and no scientific method that would separate those who should be in the male category and those who should be in the female category.
Then I'll ask again, why have categories at all? If that's the case, if you can't separate them...
He's being deliberately vague. He's being vague on purpose and gaslighting the spectators in what is this spectator sport.
If you're not going to provide concrete and conclusive answers to refute what the IBA is saying, that these two fighters have male chromosomes, if you don't do anything about that, you know what people are going to do? They're going to assume the IBA was telling the truth.
Irrespective of these two fighters' nuanced and unique biology, if that biology, that sexual development disorder, whatever you want to call it, constitutes a physical advantage over the women in this category, what that means is that they still shouldn't have been there.
And the IBA's ban should have been upheld, whether they were recognized by the IOC or not.
You're not convincing anybody of anything by filing a complaint, a formal complaint in Paris, and a complaint against who? Who exactly? Do you want to take the IBA on?
Because the IOC might have been willing to keep your secret, but the IBA is not.
If you push them, those results that you're trying to suppress, they may come out. The more you try to suppress them and convince people of something else in the absence of a cheek swab or some scientific method that verifies you're an XX fighter and not an XY fighter,
you got over on the IOC. They played along. They're complicit, but the people watching, they're not.
And that's the bottom line.
You want Ortiz to fight Crawford next?
I will not work with Tszyu.
Well, what happened?
Let him in his way. He doesn't understand.
Yeah?
How about Fundora? Is Fundora in the mix?
Yeah, Fundora is good fighter.
People saying the fight that makes sense, money is Fundora Spence. But now Spence is no longer, correct? Is that fight completely off?
That is not true. That is not true.
People, who is reporting these things?
You know, you go on social media, you're going to see a lot of lies.
Okay.
If you want the right things, I'm not going to tell you guys everything because it's not my job. That's the promoter job.
It's still in the works, possibly.
Of course, it's still in the works. Of course. Spence is Spence. You know, I don't see why he would retire, but you see these rumors online and.
The spin doctors and apologists are already hard at work to do damage control for Virgil Ortiz, for Sebastian Fundora, who are openly avoiding a fight with Terence Crawford, even if Saudi money comes attached to it, even if Turkey is committed and willing to make these fights for Terence Crawford. It is these fighters that are unwilling and have other plans.
Sebastian doesn't want Terence. He wants the guy that Terence beat up last year. Sebastian wants Spence, and Virgil wants the winner of that fight.
That's where it's at. Turki Al-Sheikh was in attendance for yesterday's junior middleweight action.
I wonder how he felt hearing Virgil target the winner of Fundora versus Spence instead of Terence Crawford. I wonder what was going through Turkey's mind.
I knew that as soon as he tries to do business with the fighters that are based out of America, he's going to encounter a problem, because what a lot of these fighters like to pretend is that it's the politics, that it's always the politics that stop fights from happening.
Promoters, platforms, all working within their own best interests that can't meet a common ground. Sometimes that's the case, sometimes, but other times it's that the fighters don't want it.
The fighters and their teams don't want risky fights.
They want easy money.
Why else would Sebastian be more interested in fighting Errol Spence instead of the man that beat Errol Spence, the one with a belt in his division?
You want Ortiz to fight Crawford next.
I will not work with Tszyu.
Well, what happened?
How about
Let him in his way. He doesn't understand.
Yeah.
That's what caught me off guard yesterday. That apparently Turki and Tim won't be working with each other for reasons that are unknown.
I came to become a fan of Tszyu because he struck me as a fighter that never shies away from a challenge. I mean, he never had to come to America for the likes of a Terrell Gachet. It was a step backwards for Tim, fighting at a small local venue like the Armory in Minneapolis. Terrell Gachet ain't the kind of fighter you're supposed to get on a plane to fight.
No.
If anything, he should have got on a plane to fight you.
The same applies to Keith Thurman, who Tim was supposed to fight, and the same applies to Sebastian Fundora. These are not big names and big ticket sellers in America. None of those guys that the PBC has been offering up to Tim since he jumped into bed with them. And don't forget, he jumped into bed with them looking for a Charlo fight that he never even got.
But I became a fan of this guy because it looked like he's a guy who don't shy away from a challenge. He don't back down from a fight.
So what could have caused Turki Al-Sheikh to not work with Tszyu moving forward if he's that kind of fighter? And being honest with you, the only thing I can think of, the only common denominator between the situations I'm seeing at 154 and Tim is Terence Crawford.
We know that Turki wants to make big fights for Terence Crawford. Turki wants Virgil to fight Terence. Virgil wants to fight the winner of Fundora Spence.
So is it possible that he has a similar proposition for Tim? He wants Tim to fight Terence, but maybe Tim
wants to fight somebody else.
We know that a few days ago, an order from the IBF came down ordering reigning IBF champion, newly crowned, Bakram Murtazaliev to fight Tim Tszyu. And that's supposed to go down sometime late next month in Australia. Is that what caused the rift between Turki and Tim? That what Turki wants is for Tim to fight Terence, but Tim wants to fight Bakram first.
Is that the problem?
Now, some have already taken to saying that while Turki Al-Sheikh is a generous benefactor to the sport of boxing, perhaps he is overstepping his bounds. I don't agree with these people. I resist that opinion.
Why?
Because what you're doing is making him out to be the bad guy for trying to make the best fights. Trying to make the best fight the best. As a consumer, do you want to see that or not?
You're saying he's acting like a spoiled brat? He's overstepping his bounds by doing what?
What?
Doing what exactly? Trying to make the best fights. That's him overstepping his bounds.
Don't you notice that Turki doesn't encounter a problem until he starts dealing with fighters that are either based out of America or work with American promotional outfits? Don't you notice that?
Tim's not based out of America.
But he does work with an American promotional outfit. He does work with the PBC. We know the PBC for years now have tried to freeze out Terence Crawford out of the welterweight division. It seems they're doing it again in the junior middleweight division, because I can't for the life of me understand why Turki and Tim wouldn't be able to work together, wouldn't be able to work with each other. And maybe it's because Turki's invested in Terence. He wants to make fights for Terence.
I see that Terence, in pursuing a fight with Canelo Alvarez, made an enemy out of many of the Chicano boxing fans, many of the Mexican-American fans. All of a sudden, they hate him, they hate Turki.
It's just another form of tribalism. Everybody thinks they're immune. Everybody claims everybody else is biased until their own biases start to come out.
You don't think you're being biased?
Biased by doing what exactly? By advocating that these fighters fight each other? That these fighters fight Terence? That's bias?
The last 2 weeks, what Canelo's fans have been saying is that Terence's resume is paper thin, and all he really has on there is a win over a damaged goods Errol Spence. If that's true
to you guys, you should be happy that Turki wants to make these fights. Hell, you should be supporting him, and you're not.
How many times have I told you, the American boxing scene is not what it used to be, and the American boxing fan, in a very general sense, is pretty fucking useless.
To see, Turki didn't encounter any resistance or any obstacles up until he endeavored into the American boxing scene. Well, he doesn't have enough money for the Americans, but he had enough money for Anthony Joshua. He had enough money for Tyson Fury, for Usyk, all those other fighters based out of Europe and the UK.
But not for the highfalutin American fighters, huh?
All that tells me is you can't pay these guys enough money to fight the best. And their supporters, their fans, they don't really want the best to fight the best more than they want to keep their own narratives and agendas alive.
Their own tribalism.
While complaining about someone else's.
Shit for brains.
So here's the skinny. Next month, whether he likes it or not, Bakram Murtazaliev is going to have to fight Tszyu as his mandatory challenger. He's been mandated to fight him. I think Tszyu is going to win the fight. I think Tszyu is going to become IBF champion. Now, when he does, he'll have a choice. He can pursue a unification match with Terence Crawford on Turki Al-Sheikh's dime. If they can revisit that fight, he can do that. Or he can pursue the winner of Fundora versus Spence. The problem with that is we don't know when Fundora versus Spence is happening. Is it happening later on this year or at some point early next year? That the winner of that fight, that outcome, is further out. Whereas Terence
will be immediately available. He just fought over a week ago. You don't have to wait for him. On that schedule, if Tim fights next month and he wins,
they're on practically the same schedule. Terence having fought in August and Tim fighting in September.
So if he wants it, it's there. If he doesn't want it, and he decides he would rather wait for the winner of Fundora versus Spence, there's two problems there. One, you don't know when that's happening. And two, even when you do, and if you do,
there is still Virgil Ortiz to account for. Virgil Ortiz to contend with. You see, Virgil became WBC interim champion. He wants the winner of that fight, and he has a precedent to get them because he's WBC interim champion. In the coming weeks, Sebastian Fundora may end up giving up the WBO title to Terence so that he can go through with that fight with Errol,
leaving him only with the WBC title.
That may be the only title that he brings to an Errol Spence Jr. fight. If he keeps it and beats Errol and stays WBC champion, he will then have to deal with Virgil Ortiz.
That's his mandatory.
Virgil is in the queue, perhaps more so than Tszyu. Virgil is the mandatory challenger to the winner of that fight. So in a situation where Tim wants the winner of that fight, Virgil's ahead of him in the line.
You can't both get the winner of that fight at the same time.
Somebody's going to have to wait, and while they wait, there's going to be mounting pressure to take on Terence Crawford. Who's it going to be? I don't know. I don't know yet. Tszyu versus the winner of that fight is essentially an in-house affair involving the PBC, more or less, with fighters that they deal with.
Makes it easier to make.
But if the winner of that fight, whoever it is, wants to stay WBC champion, you know, Virgil can always put pressure on the WBC, and the WBC can put pressure on them to fight him.
And Terence?
He may collect the WBO title while he waits to fight one or some of these guys. You know that Terence might actually have to take up Danny Garcia on his offer to move up to 160 and face him for the WBA title if he beats Lara.
You think he's gonna beat Lara?
I don't know what to think, and that's not the point. If Danny gets the job done at 160 and the guys at 154 are freezing Terence out, one thing he can do, one avenue he can explore, is to move up one more time to take on Danny. He can beat Danny. 147, 154, 160, any division you name, he beats Danny.
Danny is at the end of his career. He hasn't fought in 2 years. If he pulls off some kind of miracle on the undercard of Canelo versus Berlanga, that's a guy that Terence can hit up to see about becoming a 5-division champion.
Maybe he can't become a 3-time undisputed champion, but he can see about becoming a champion at 5 weights.